right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. As always, I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If this is your first time here, we are primarily an interview and a commentary-based podcast. Today, we have an interview for you. On the studio line is Nancy Jasin Ensley. Nancy, welcome to the program. So glad you are here.
Thank you, Billy. I'm happy to be here. Very much so.
Let me tell you a little bit about Nancy. Nancy is an author, legal nurse, hospice specialist, and I got some questions about that, and a teacher. And most of her life has been spent working in environments where people are not presenting polished versions of themselves. In healthcare and hospice work, Nancy has learned that when life gets serious, people don't need performance. They need clarity, presence, and honest communication. That understanding has shaped how Nancy listens to people and how she understands the world. Across memoirs, fiction, science fiction, mystery, thriller, action, and children's literature, her writing reflects the human experience, resilience, faith, family, and the choices that define us. Nancy loves exploring how people overcome challenges, discover strength, and find meaning. She is passionate about translating those insights into stories that resonate with readers. A couple of things stand out to me is your multi-genre in terms of how you write, and you got a pretty active resume there. Lots of things to call upon in terms of your background. So that's wonderful. Where are you from originally?
I was born in New Jersey in 1941 and lived right across the bay from New York. I could watch them build the towers, and
Wow.
And I had a whole different accent, and I could put it on for you if you want it.
Well, if you want to sample it, you go right ahead.
Well, talking like this, you don't talk you don't open your mouth. You use your hands all the time, and you don't look at anybody. You just kind of look away because you don't want them to know. That's it.
I've been told, like a Boston accent, you take R's out where they belong and you put them where they don't belong. Like, here's my cat.
That's right.
And I got an idea. So yeah, that's awesome. Now you obviously you've done a lot of things, and I want to talk to you about the hospice. But at what point did you become inspired to be a writer and doing all the things that you've done?
I was 4 years old when I began to read. When my parents didn't have a lot of money, and they would put books and newspapers and whatever magazines. And I saw all these funny looking things that I thought I learned were letters. And then I'd ask questions. And after I did that enough, I could read by the time I was about 4 years old. As far as writing, I went to Catholic school, and I was very shy. I was very just afraid to do anything. But when they sent me to the board, I didn't have to look at who was looking at me. So I would write, and the nun said, "Oh my goodness, you can write. You're so young." And that was nice to have a compliment. I didn't get a lot of those. Mm-hmm. And so I started writing. My first poem was to my mother on Mother's Day. And I wrote a 4-line poem to her. And she was so excited. She gave me a big hug and big kiss. And from then on, I loved writing and I loved reading. I would get any book I could possibly get. One of the books that I had was a golden book, Dr. Dan, Nancy Nurse and Dr. Dan. And because it had my name on it, I thought, that's what you're going to be. You're going to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. So I followed that path of caretaking all through my life. And probably took it to a farther range than I should have. You can over caretake, which is, I'm sure you know that. Yeah. And so I always loved reading. I always loved writing. I journaled. I have journals all over the place. And I have some hidden ones that they'll find after I pass. And they'll be really surprised about things I would say. But I have written ever since that chalkboard allowed me to put some letters on it.
That's fascinating. The hospice thing, I had an experience a number of years ago now. My mom was in hospice, and I was a full-time caregiver for a while, so I know what you're talking about. That can wear you down. And I got to tell you, that's a That's something that people do that don't get it, that doesn't get enough credit. Dealing with a loved one like that, you're never really asleep. You're never really awake. It's yeah. But having had that experience, and I got to know some of the hospice nurses, and then over the years, I've done interviews with different hospice nurses. And I got to tell you, I'm not much of a spiritual person. I really don't know if I could tell you how I could categorize my faith. But I'll tell you one thing that intrigues me, in that all these hospice nurses that I've talked to, I want to see if you align with this. There's a strange consistency in some of the final moments that these people have that is very hard to deny. And what I'm getting at is one of the interviews that I did. They've all alluded to it, where these people aren't necessarily drugged out. They're not necessarily, they're for the most part, they're almost perfectly lucid. They're aware of where they're at, what time of day it is, and so forth. But they see dead people in a way that is very hard to not believe. Have you had these experiences, and what is your opinion about that?
Billy, I've had the experiences outside of hospice, taking care of people in the hospital, in ICU, all of those ways. But what I got in hospice is this thing called a transition.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a CD that one of the hospices have. I don't know if they have it anymore, but there is a time when the person's present. They may be slowly going into the last stages, which is almost like a coma, but they're still hearing and seeing. I have had people patients in the hospice at night. This one I have to tell you.
Sure.
It was dark. I was in her room. She had a mirror over her dresser, and the door was shut. There was no heat or anything going on. It was mild. She had been a model in her early 20s. So she wore things from the 30s.
I see. Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I was holding her hand, and she was agonal breathing, meaning breathing rapidly. She didn't have any family, no visitors. So I volunteered to sit with her. I was holding her hand, and something happened in the room. It was like an energy. I'm sure you know what I mean.
Yes.
It's an energy, and energy doesn't die. And it wasn't. All of a sudden, across, there was this figure, a silhouette of a person in a big hat and a dress that moved across her mirror. She opened her eyes, squeezed my hand, looked at me, or past me, through me,
mm-hmm.
to whatever that figure was.
Yeah.
And said goodbye and died.
Wow.
That was the most radical one. I've seen many others. There's an energy in the room, and I'm sure other hospice nurses have told you. You can't describe it. It's almost like an electrical energy and a breeze that comes in there. I saw a gentleman who was the colonel that took care of the when we had a huge snowstorm in the 70s. He was the head of it, and his daughters were there, and he was dying. He had a balloon that said "I love you" at the end of his bed. Mm-hmm. No heat was on, no air, no anything, and they were arguing, the two sisters, and they didn't want him to die. Dad, you can't. They didn't give him permission. Okay, you can hear to the very end. That's why you keep talking to someone or say whatever, tell them something funny. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden the balloon went down like this toward him. He opened his eyes, and they said, Dad, they're going to have, excuse me, they used to call it shit on a shingle. It was an army thing.
Yeah.
Tip beef on toast. That's what it was. Sure. They're going to have that tomorrow. You want to stay alive. The balloon went down toward his feet, and it went back up again, and he died. He passed away. They had never had chip beef on toast at this facility that I worked. That's what they had the next day.
Wow.
It was almost like he was playing a joke on his kids and telling them not to argue. So I definitely agree with you, Billy. And I'm sure, and I so agree with the caretaking. That is one of the hardest jobs in the world. First of all, you may not even be trained to do that, to change a person, to take care of their catheters, take care of all things, and be awake all the time. No, always ready, always watching. So yes, absolutely don't get the credit they need, that people need.
Well, I'm glad we had this discussion because, first of all, it's very interesting. And second of all, it gives us a pretty good indication of the life experiences and the kind of work that you've done, transitioning into your work as an author. And thank you for the work you've done, because I got to tell you, that's important work. I could transition this by saying that you often turn life's twists and turns into stories that inspire. And I wish I could do that more often. But people can come through adversity a lot of times better than when they went in, and a lot of people don't. But there's those who do. Is that an angle that you like to explore in your writing?
Absolutely. In fact, that's a touchstone of many of the things I've written. I initially had started my memoir, which is The Tire Swing, and I put it away. I had a section of my life that was very traumatic, and I won't go into that. It's a long story, but it was a time when I really wasn't the person I wanted to be. So I prayed a lot. I have a faith. Everyone has something, whether it's a breeze or a paper clip or whatever it is.
Right. Sure.
You don't have to name it. It's just whatever you just expressed to me, your caretaking and how you went through that. That is a beautiful thing. So during that time, it was really hard. After I recovered from some of the things that happened, I took that out, my tire swing, and it was called The Closet. And the closet was very dark. And some of it is there just to let you know who I was and how I survived that. But I changed it to The Tire Swing because that was a part of my life that saved me. I lived with my grandmother. She had a tire swing, and I made up a poem in the beginning of the book because the tire swing felt like it was holding me, and I could swing as high as I wanted so I could see down the street if my parents were coming home. And then I could swing back and get that funny feeling in my stomach. And it's kind of like life. You find something that will hold you, that it will take care of you. You can swing as high as you want to go, but it'll snap you back. It'll snap you back. Or you can spin. Sometimes you have to just spin and let the world go crazy for you a little bit. So it's kind of like that. So that was part of my story, and I'm open to tell everyone about my life, hoping that when you have traumatic things happen to you or PTSD, surely you need help with that, professional help, but the support you get from people that you can trust is really important. Forgiveness is so important. Mm-hmm. Whatever faith you have, whatever forgiveness you have, you need to forgive. Because if you hang on to resentments, if I hung on to resentments, it just would be a heavy albatross that would be hanging on me.
Yeah.
So any of my books, I wanted to have a message, even in the children's books, that kindness to don't be unkind to someone that's different than you are. You don't know how they live and what they've gone through.
Sure.
So you learn something from everyone. So it doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter how they talk. You will learn from them if you listen. I'm sure you agree that hearing is one thing, listening is another.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. And so hopefully through my books, I always want a message, even the murder mystery, there's a message there about how to forgive, even the worst things. That doesn't mean you condone them, but you can forgive. And that's a real heavy thing that needs to happen. Look at your fears. Most of our feelings are based in fear. Mm-hmm. and look at that what is. And when you write, when you journal, anybody, just write. It doesn't matter. You don't have to show anyone. When I put something on paper, the way it's spinning in my mind turns out really different when I put it down in the words. I thought, oh, did I really say that? I really think that. So all of that. So that is the general theme through all the books I've written, even the sci-fi book, believe it or not, which was a really difficult one for me to write. I did that for my grandson. He said, Grandma, I want you to write sci-fi. I want you to show my aliens in it, because he was quite a drawer.
Okay.
And I don't know how to do that. He says, you can do anything. You do it. And so I had to study, because I believe that fiction has to have some believability in it.
Sure. Yeah.
No, you got to connect with something that you understand. So I had to read about a lot of things, and I found this planet, Billy. There are 5 planets at the edge of our universe. This is true. The middle planet, which I call Indigo 35, but it has this huge long number with a lot of letters. It's actually there. It's got a kind of a bluish hue to it. It's the same size as Earth. It's the same distance from its 2 suns. So it might be livable. Who knows? It's you'd be 1,000 years old if you ever get through a black hole to get there. But I found a way to do it. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, that's I was going to ask you, but I think you explained it. What would be the challenge about science fiction? This is my opinion about science fiction. I'm not a big science fiction person, but if you look at the most successful science fiction stories that have been told, is that they take one premise and they ask you to believe that one premise. When they continue to make jumps is when there's a problem. Like Alien, for example, pretty easy to understand. There's a bunch of humans on a ship. There's a bad alien. They're going to fight. Pretty easy. Okay. Terminator. You got a good Terminator. You got a bad Terminator. Easy to understand. When you start having things happen like, okay, there's a human fighting a bad alien, and then he tripped and he walked into another dimension. Now he met himself, and now himself is the bad guy. Okay. When you start doing all that, okay, it loses its form. I think that science fiction, I think the audience will accept one aspect where they have to suspend their disbelief, and then that's pretty much as far as it goes when it comes to mainstream audiences. Am I right about that? Or
you're so right, Billy. Honest, you are very right. That's why I believe that the backstory is very important, that you know who the protagonists are and how does that change them going into another, I don't say dimensions, but going into another whole area that they've never seen. I don't have a lot of googly monsters in mine. I think that Disneyfies it. I don't know how to say that, but I love Disney. But I wanted them to know these people and how power and how changing your whole life quickly, how that changes them for the good, for the bad, for whatever, what brings them back. And so I wanted them to understand that. I had to understand wormholes, what those are. They're everywhere. They're in the room right now. They're all around us. They're energy patterns, and they're negative. They do not have positive and negative. You cannot go in there and being a positive and negative energy person. You'll blow up. So you have to find a way to do that. So I use science. My husband is a big sci-fi guy. And he's not quite a reader, so I'm making him read to go 35. He said, I didn't know that. Is that really true? He says, well, these people. He says, where did you get these people? And I said, from people, a mixture. So I totally agree with you.
I'm pretty good with relativity, which is Einstein's theory. I was kind of a science nerd, and I'm pretty good with quantum mechanics. Not as good as I am with relativity, but one of the things I've heard about, I don't know if you've incorporated, is this thing called entanglement. I don't know if you've incorporated that, but that's kind of interesting. That basically says if we have an atom and I split this atom right here, and there's 2 pieces of this atom, and I strike one, the other, they both ring at exactly the same time. But what's interesting is if I take half of that atom go to the other side of the galaxy and I ping this half atom, they both still ping at exactly the same time.
Isn't
That's some pretty amazing stuff.
amazing? Amazing.
It tells it, and I see that's the thing. You can do a lot. You can take those concepts and go too far with them as a fiction writer, if you're not careful. And it sounds to me like you kept it within a certain boundary that the audience could accept.
I hope so. Yeah, I believe so. And I did do something with atoms, by the way. I won't tell you what it is. You'll have to read about it. But I took the true concept, and I played with it a little bit, because the scientists that are my protagonists are very bright, and they're trying to hide something that they're doing from the heads of the corporation that hired them immediately. So there's a lot of intrigue in that. But I'm so glad you brought that up, because I thought maybe I shouldn't put this in here. It's gonna, they'll go to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's exciting because it contributes to the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely it does. And I'll tell you, it's interesting stuff. And I would encourage anybody, if you think science is boring, or you just you're missing out not only on education, but you're missing out on entertainment. I find it very, very intriguing. If you remember the original Cosmos series with Carl Sagan, if you remember that.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, good stuff. Another thing that you do, as I mentioned kind of at the top of the show, is the multi-genre thing. And that's a bit of a controversy. Now, I'm not an author, but I've talked to a lot of them. And they all agree that an author is kind of like a brand. People know what to expect. They know to expect a political thriller. They know to expect a love story. They know to expect so on. I have a lot of people that like the idea of using their creativity for other types of stories.
Mm-hmm.
But then I have other people tell me, if your audience isn't, if they become a fan of yours because of the political thriller, like the Clancy type thing, then, Clancy writes a love story and it's not what they expected. Have you encountered that? What's your opinion about that multi-genre writing?
Yes, I have heard that from publishers, people like that. And I never really intended to. I wanted to. My original thought after I wrote the memoir, and I kind of got used to the flow of writing and how you have to edit. I love 18th century history, and I always wanted to create a series of books that had the same protagonists and their people that, in their family. But I haven't gotten there yet. I get this, I'm sitting here and there's a squirrel that came up here and he talks to me, he chatters. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I've listed some children's books that I'd love to do with Sammy, with Sylvester, the silly squirrel. And all of a sudden the idea comes to me. I think my passion won't let me not do something with it. That's why I self-published quite a bit. I sent queries out to publishers. I got 2 interested, and they were interested in 2 different genres completely. Mm-hmm. The science fiction one has gotten the most attention.
Okay.
That's just newly out. And I think it's become a vogue now. It's come back where, Star Trek was the big thing. Now it's come back with Hail Mary and some of the new ones. So I didn't perceive that. So my agent has asked me to write some more, and I'll think about it. I haven't had anyone that's read my books not say, I wish you only did like James Patterson. I wish you had your detective or your lover or your 18th century heroine. No one's ever told me that, because I guess I let them know who I am. And maybe I live on flight of ideas. I don't know what it is, but I have such a passion to put a message out there, and it has to come from different areas. And that's how I feel. I understand politics. I write my congressman all the time. I don't bash anyone. It isn't my thing to do. I don't have time to do that. And I don't know their whole story.
Yeah.
So, but I am very interested in that. And I hated politics. Anytime I got a leadership role, I said, I don't want it. I don't want to get politics. Politics and healthcare is scattered. It's everywhere. But I needed to have a message, and my protagonist needed to be like Huck Finn. Okay. I needed the two boys and orphans. They still wound up in a terrorist nightmare. I mean, most of my books have action in it. They have heroism in it. They have an evil person in it. They have a love in it, some very dense romantic love. So it has a little bit of everything in each one, no matter what. Even the children's one. So that's who I am.
Yeah, the same mix of elements is in there, regardless of what the genre might be. The same mix of elements is kind of another thing authors do. And I don't know, but what's your opinion about using different author names for writing different types of books? I've heard authors do that.
I really only use this one name
for you. Sure. Yeah, that's what works.
An author's name. Yeah. Sometimes I thought about just using one name. I have a lot of names that people have called me, and and possibly could use that. My last name was my maiden name was Ball, Ball, and I was so teased, and I was such a shy thing. My dad, it really wasn't his given name. It was Fitzpatrick, but it couldn't fit on his sign. So he took his stepdad's name, and I don't know if it's legal or not. So I was going to call myself. They called me Bouncy Bolly. I wasn't quite sure how I'd form that new name. I always loved the name Catherine, and I thought about just saying Catherine.
Yeah.
So who knows? Right now, this is okay with me.
What book, as we're talking here, people find you interesting? I'm sure they do already. What book of yours would you like to most recommend, or where should readers start with you?
I would suggest, depending on their age, I would suggest them reading The Tire Swing. The Tire Swing has elements of all kinds of life. And I think there are messages for any person. Everybody has things in their life, good and bad, and funny. There's poetry in there. There's hilarity in there. There's a little bit of everything. And that way they'll kind of get to know what I'm going to be like with my other books. The next one, the one that was sold the best was Rainbows in December. It's a shorter book. It's a lot of evil in it. People who they get power and money, and they turn into something else, but they still think they're the way they were before. Yeah. They really, really hide in a corner. I don't know what they do, but a lot of people liked Rainbow in December. There's a lot of, you couldn't guess who the murderer is. It would be difficult for you to guess the ending. Okay. I know they love that. So Rainbow in December or The Tire Swing. And if they're in young adults, I would say Orphans, they would love it. Mm-hmm.
I've known a lot of musicians, and a lot of times they can find inspiration in the oddest things, whether it be, the tires tickety-tacking or whatever. They find a rhythm, they find a beat. I know a lot of times in your case, you've talked about things that happening in your life can inspire a story, sometimes even, a bad event. What happens? How does things strike you? Is there a consistency, or do they just come out of the blue?
I think they're behind the quick ideas that I get. I'll give you an example. There's a squirrel that comes up here, and he chatters in my window whenever I'm working, and my husband feeds him, and he thinks he's okay. So all of a sudden I wrote down what I thought I'm going to try to do a children's book, but it isn't just that. Then I started to look out a little bit farther, and all the things that my husband does around the house, owning a home, we never owned a home when I was a child. We rented, we ran away from when we didn't pay the rent, all of that. So I kind of like a domino effect
Mm-hmm.
happens. You get this sudden thing, someone says something and you want to hold on to it. Oh, that'd make a great title. And then all of a sudden chemically, I think it goes somewhere in your brain where I'm not going to get real technical here, but there's a part of your brain that decides where the electrical impulses are going to go.
Mm.
That's below the primary portion of your head. It's the hippocampus, by the way. Isn't that a funny name?
Yeah.
But it is a hippocampus because it has all the electrical energy, and it somehow gets messages, says, I want you to go over here. This is where speech is important.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where memories are. And so all of a sudden something will trigger that. If you have a decently healthy brain, and it will go wherever that memory takes you. And you're like, I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah.
So it's like the musician hearing a tap, tap, tap. There's a bird outside. It screeches. I think it's a bluebird. And he's telling everybody else that he doesn't want them around. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
when I hear that, it brings me back to all the times I felt I was being attacked, like somebody's yelling at me, and they weren't. Right. It's just my background that there. And then that will lead me to write a story about it, or think about writing something or adding perhaps on orphans. They said you should write a sequel to orphans because these boys are young. And I tried really hard for a long time to do that, but I just couldn't find the place. So all of a sudden, one day the kids were over and they were telling me about things they did in school. And I thought, well, I'm going to use that. So never know where the triggers are going to come from.
I have a friend who's a humor writer, and I asked her one time, we were talking about writer's block, and she said that writer's block is a convenience that amateur writers have. And she has deadlines because she does a column. Oh, yeah. And she said, you got to write whether you feel like it or not. Do you have to incorporate that kind of discipline into your work?
Yes. Yeah. Now I do even more. That I have an agent. He said, I want you to do 50 books. Okay. 50 more books. So I'm like, I'm going to be 100. Yeah. No, he said one a month.
Wow.
Oh, so I started looking back through my paperwork and through the computer, and I have several of those zip drives. So I got really, because when someone gives me an order, being a nurse, I do it right away. You have to do it right away. Okay. So that's in there. And work was always, you're going to do your work. That's what you do. I don't care what else you have to think about. So I started looking through my paperwork, and I realized that I have a start of a manuscript for orphans, one for a children's book. I have another one for Lavender, it's a novel, and it's pretty eerie. I have to stay up late at night to think of the things that this girl is doing. I thought, I got a head start. So it prompted me to do something, even when I didn't want to do it, because I put them away for a reason.
Sure.
You know how that is, even in what you do. Sometimes you like, I don't want to do this. But at least you put them somewhere that you could access it.
Absolutely.
It's in here somewhere too. Yeah. So all of that.
Well, I used to work. I was a disc jockey for many years, and then I did stand up comedy for a very short while. But I did stand up comedy for a while, and there were nights when you just didn't feel like, if I didn't have to go to work, I would have stayed home. If it was, but you got to go out there and you got to do it. And oddly enough, some of the nights that I was charged up, I didn't do as well as when I really wasn't into it. So you just don't know. I think a lot of it just has to do with your body chemistry on a certain day.
Yeah.
And how you're feeling. So that's interesting. We've been talking to Nancy Jasin Ensley, and incredible conversation. Thank you so much for being on, first of all. Where can people find you? I mean, are you on the typical places for social media? And where can people buy your books?
They can buy my books on Amazon, primarily got Goodreads, Barnes and Nobles, hopefully with the LCCN now that I have for my books, they'll be in the bookstores. Also, the library will have it since I have Library of Congress. Libraries should have those. I am also very willing to go and talk to whoever wants me to talk, even if it's another state. That's great. I love it. I love meeting people. So I'll do it if they want me. I have a new website. It's www.Nancy Jasin Ensley. You can see it on the screen.com.
Yeah.
And that has all my books on it and a link to the other resources.
I should probably mention here again, a lot of people just listen, even if they're watching video. Your name is Nancy, and then the Jasin is Jasin.
Yes.
And then Ensley, which is Ensley. Okay.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much for being on the program. Really enjoyed the conversation. Well, you have a lot of insight. I think that's what makes you such a compelling guest. You have a lot of insight into life, and they always say that makes the best writers. So thank you very much for being on.
Thank you. You too, Billy. I enjoyed talking to you. I could talk to you forever. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Yes, absolutely. You'll have to come on again. Just a reminder, you can find me on social media.
I will. I definitely will look. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I want to hear you do stand-up comedy. That's
yeah. I think I have some old videos of myself, but
that would be great.
I'm at Billy Dees, which is the former Twitter, but it is now X. And you can the audience can find me most places on social media. But I'm going to say X is kind of like my social media home, only because it's so real time. It's so trending.
Okay.
And that's probably where the best place to find me. So thank you very much for listening to our program today.
Thank you.
And we will talk to you again very, very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Billy Dees podcast. Follow Billy Dees on X @BillyDees for updates about the program.
Do you listen to music or audiobooks on streaming devices such as Sonos or Amazon speakers? How about on your car sound system? If you use Spotify, Audible, or Amazon Music on any of these systems, you can also listen to the Billy Dees podcast the same way. Billy and his team go the extra mile to make sure our podcasts sound as good or better than anything on the radio. Listening to the Billy Dees podcast has never been easier. You literally just have to ask.